We'll call the City Council regular meeting to order for Tuesday, January 3rd, 2006. Will please stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance. Tracy, roll call, please.
Arbogast.
Here.
Garnis.
Here.
Gisselbeck.
Here.
Heller.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Meisenheimer is absent. Solberg. Walder.
Here.
Wilson is also absent. York.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of December 19th, 2005. So moved by Mr. Giselbeck and seconded by Mr. Solberg. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 2 is the application for transfer of a retail on-off sale malt beverage license from Roger Meyer, 1112 Karen Street, to David Bluedorn, Sportsman's Inn Casino. And Tracy, you'll speak to that?
Thank you. I can introduce that. Yes, this license is currently at Mr. Meyer's residence in an inactive status, so this is not actively being used currently. And the new location will be, I think you're familiar with the new convenience store that's being put in across Highway 20 from Airport Drive. So that is gives you the location of the new location for this particular license. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, I would turn it back to you, Mayor, for any public comment.
Thank you, Tracy. We'll begin with the public hearing. Is there anyone to speak to the issue on the transfer of the license? If not, we'll close the public hearing and go to council action. May I have a motion then for the transfer of the license?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Walder. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Solberg. Is there any further discussion?
I just have one question, Herb, maybe you can answer this, or Rick. Do they have to, on that, do they have to build an accel, decel lane in that location, or is it just, I mean, it's kind of a,
There's not one currently contemplated,
there's not?
No.
Okay, I thought,
and we consulted with the DOT, and they didn't advise of one either.
okay.
Is there any other discussion on the issue? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3 is the application for a retail on-sale wine license for David Bluedorn, Sportsman's Inn Casino. We'll begin with a public hearing. Is there anyone to speak to the issue? If not, we'll close the public hearing and request council action to either approve or disapprove of the retail license for wine. Would there be a motion from the council? So moved by Mr. Solberg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Heller. Is there any further discussion?
Is, the wine license in that location, is that, does it meet all the criteria for that?
Well, I guess the short answer to that question, Mr. Johnson, is I don't know. Certainly, the applicant has made or has filed the right paperwork with the finance office, but as this council knows, one of the requirements for being able to sell alcoholic beverages on Sunday to get this particular class of license is that the applicant has to have a restaurant, as that term is used in state statute. You folks have, we've addressed this issue before with Foxy's, with, I believe it was Woody's, with Doc's. We've done this on a number of occasions, and typically the applicant would present evidence as to what type of restaurant facility that they have. To refresh the council's memory, the language of statute that the council has incorporated by ordinance indicates that the municipality, the governing body, you folks, in your discretion, can provide the right to sell or serve alcoholic beverages between the hours of 11 a.m. and 12 midnight with the serving of food if the licensee has facilities for the serving of prepared meals from a fixed restaurant with the simultaneous seating capacity of at least 50 patrons in municipalities of the first class, which of course Watertown is. So the requirement basically is also the same for this type of wine license, in that the term restaurant means only a room regularly and in a bona fide manner used and kept open for the serving of meals to guests for compensation, which has suitable table accommodations for at least 50 guests at one and the same time, and a connected kitchen containing conveniences for cooking sufficient to provide meals in a bona fide manner for 50 guests at one and the same time. The short answer to your question, Mr. Johnson, I apologize for just reading, but I don't know. I don't know that the applicant has presented any information as to what their facilities are and whether or not they do have the capacity. So maybe the best thing to do is to not take action or table it or something. But
I'm going to motion to table that until the facility is complete and we can have a clear picture of what's going on out there.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table it. Is there any discussion on that? If not, all in favor?
Well, in regards to that, who is there someone on staff who should have checked this out ahead of time, or has this
Well, it's not done yet.
responsibility?
I will certainly confess to, on occasion when this has come up, just on my own, no one's ever directed me to, but I went out with a digital camera and took took photos of these on behalf of the applicant and presented them to you. I confess it wasn't until this morning that I knew that this application was before you folks, and I did not have the opportunity to do that.
I think it ought to be, it should be the responsibility of the applicant to provide us all the necessary information.
Absolutely.
That hasn't happened as of this point until
Absolutely.
we get it.
We do, as a matter of practice, make sure that applicants for this type of license are made aware of what the requirements are in regard to the restaurant facilities, as Stanton has mentioned. But to actually go out and field verify that they meet that requirement, no, we have not, as a matter of practice, done that. And I guess I would concur that the burden of demonstrating that ought to be on the applicant, not on city staff to go out and verify that necessarily.
And we have no supporting documents to verify with pictures or anything, whether there's a restaurant to that facility or not, so.
To be honest, we don't even know that the facility's complete yet to be able to make the inspection.
That's true. Well, all in favor of tabling this application, all in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried to table this to another time. Item number 4 is resolution number 5-67, approving the annexation and establishing of zoning for A. Jeffrey Fox. And Rick, you're going to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor Fox, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I'll introduce this, and there are representatives of the applicant here. Mr. Jim Endries and Mr. Tom Burns are here on behalf of the applicant, so they can certainly speak to that. I'll introduce this as saying both items 4 and Mayor, if you allow item number 5, I will also be covering that. They are very much related. The petition from A. Jeffrey Fox came to you, submitted to us on your behalf, and the legal description that was included in the petition is somewhat cumbersome. So I had requested, and the applicant has agreed to plat the property as a condition of the annexation. I will inform you that as of the location, this property is 2.36 acres according to the plat that's been drawn up by Austin Engineering. It's located at Pheasant Ridge Drive in the eastern portion of our community, just south of the boundary of our Pheasant Ridge Industrial Park, a couple hundred feet north of the Highway 212 right-of-way. Right across the street from, I believe, is WW Tire Company. The applicant, Jeff Fox, requests annexation and that the zoning be affixed as C3 Highway Commercial. That is, in fact, the property is contiguous to the city, and that zoning that zoning designation request is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. This comes with the recommendation of the Plan Commission, for a recommendation for approval of annexation and the zoning of to affix the zoning of C3. So with that, I would turn it over for further comment to representatives of the applicant.
Hi, I'm Tom Burns. I had a chance to talk to Rick about these two items, 4 and 5, and I think there are about 3 items we still have to work out between us, I think having to do with the drainage and access and sidewalks. So what I suggested to Rick is that we ask the council to go ahead and approve items 4 and 5 contingent on a memorandum of understanding and agreements waiving right to protest that would be satisfactory to staff. And then we'd sit down and work on those things. So that's the way we'd like to proceed.
Okay, thank you. With that, then, could we have a motion then for 5-67 for approval with the contingencies?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Johnson. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. York. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We'll go on to resolution number 5-68. Rick?
Just additional comments we might enumerate. Mr. Burns suggested, or I'm sorry, indicated that we will be talking about drainage, and that is an issue here. The property slopes toward Pheasant Ridge Drive and toward 212, so it doesn't get into our Pheasant Ridge Industrial Park drainage, which is master planned. The area that we're platting here is included in the area that we will be master planning, and I guess I can't recall who we may have hired to do that master plan, but we just talked about that as a community and as a city to move forward with that master planning effort in the I-29-212 corridor. So that effort is underway. We would also be talking about access. You'll note that there's approximately 480 feet of frontage along Pheasant Ridge Drive. Number of accesses is an issue that we really should address. The sooner the better. It seems that 2 might be appropriate given the number of accesses across the street at WW Tire. The alignment is also important. They either need to be aligned or offset properly to reduce the vehicular conflicts there on the street. A waiver of right to protest on sidewalks. It is an ordinance requirement for sidewalk infrastructure to be installed. It might make more sense that those be installed at a later time when there's a project that will actually implement a sidewalk system. One thing that I, in visiting with Mr. Burns late this afternoon, and that's my fault, again, and looking at the plat, knowing the direction of the drainage, I just got thinking, we don't have any easements for utilities and drainage. So that'd be the other thing that I would like to work with the applicants and get the appropriate drainage as we agree upon there. So again, with those conditions, we would request your approval of plat of Wheelco addition.
Okay, with those conditions, would there be a motion then for
So
the
moved.
approval? So moved by Mr. Garnos. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Giselbeck. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I got a question for Rick. Are we going to require them, like we did on North Highway 81, to sign a paper to put in the sidewalk at a later date then? And that will be
Yes.
a requirement?
That seems the appropriate way of handling the sidewalks. Typically, those are placed in a letter of assurance or in a waiver of right to protest. So we'll utilize one of those tools that seems most appropriate in this instance.
Are there any other questions then for Rick? If not, then all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 6 is the authorization for payment of the airport premium insurance. And Tracy?
Thank you. Our airport liability insurance policy is up for renewal. The premium this year is $13,300, which is exactly the same amount that we paid a year ago for that policy. And I would recommend you authorizing renewal of that policy and payment of the premium.
Could I have a motion to that effect, please?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mrs. Arbogast. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Heller. Is there any further discussion or questions? If not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 7 is the authorize the payment of boiler insurance. I believe is boiler and machinery breakdown insurance. Tracy, is that correct? Or
That's correct. I would, however, ask to withdraw this item tonight. I'm in a discussion yet with the insurance agency on the amount of the premium. We have a little bit of a disagreement, and I'd like to come back to the council once we resolve that for that approval.
Very good. Then we'll withdraw agenda item number 7. Moving on to item number 8 is the authorize the payment of the employee bond for $2,223. And Tracy?
Thank you. This is another annual insurance policy that the city purchases. The city's share of the premium is $1,838. The balance of $385 is paid by the municipal utilities. This provides the faithful performance bond for city employees so that it protects the city against unfaithful performance by city employees. And in addition, there's a special bond required under state law for the finance officer position that also is provided for under this premium. For in both bonds carry a limit of $250,000. I would ask for your approval.
Would there be a motion then for that to be approved?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Walder and seconded by Mr. Solberg. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next is the, item number 9 is the adoption of the state revolving fund loan for facilities plan for Southwest Watertown Storm Sewer Project. And Herb?
Mayor, if you'd open the public hearing first, please.
Okay, we'll begin with the opening of a public hearing. Is there anyone to speak to the issue?
I'll begin. First, I'd comment that this item was public noticed in the December 24th edition of the Public Opinion. We're here tonight to accomplish a couple of actions required by DENR as part of the SRF application process for this project. The first is to conduct a public hearing for the facilities plan, which is part of the requirement for the application. And second, there's also a resolution on your desk that we'll approve at the end. The city contracted with Austin Engineering for completion of this facilities plan. Ardell Austin is present in the audience in case questions come up. A copy of the facilities plan was provided in your council packet, so I'll briefly cover some of the items that are required to be discussed in the public hearing, those being the need for the project, any alternatives that were evaluated, a description of the project, proposed financing, the amount of the SRF loan expected to be borrowed, the interest rate, and the term of the loan, and the effect of proposed financing on user rates. So that seems like a lot, but we'll hit the highlights. The project's needed to provide relief to several closed or semi-closed basins in Southwest Watertown. A specific concern was areas immediately adjacent to the Watertown Event Center. The on-site retention which currently exists is not sufficient to handle any more stormwater drainage, which impedes further development. Developer options were and continue to be to provide on-site detention or else to participate in a regional stormwater drainage solution, which is what this project is geared to be. The city contracted with Austin Engineering to review options to provide relief and to improve and enhance the stormwater drainage in the Southwest Watertown area. Several alternatives were considered. The first was to do nothing and require future developers to provide on-site detention to move a development forward. In at least 2 situations already, on-site detention has been required. However, neither staff nor developers see this alternative as a viable long-term option because the developer either has to give up a portion of his building site to meet the requirement and thereby limits either the building size or a potential future expansion on that site. The second alternative was to run a new storm sewer in the road ditch of Highway 212 from the event center east to Highway 20, which would then drain south in an existing open drainage channel to Lake Pelican. The problem we have is the entire area is very flat with limited outfall capacity, i.e. It can't hold a lot of additional water. Because of the flatness, the pipe would either have to be buried or most likely have to be buried in the 212 road ditch, which would then either limit the pipe cover and cause freezing or else eliminate the existing drainage storage capacity which is currently in the road ditch. Also, the drainage channel that was constructed to handle the existing storm sewer by Prairie Stop, which is at Highway 212 and 20, and therefore would have to be expanded to accommodate additional drainage, as well as there's cattails and a lot of additional work would have to be done to bring that up to speed. 3 concerns with this alternative was the shallowness of the cover for the pipe, additional pipe lengths required to connect to the various closed basins in the area, and the less overall capacity that would be provided by this alternative, so not the best alternative in the eyes of the consultant. The third alternative, and we would consider the preferred alternative, was to run a storm sewer from the drainage pond next to the event center north to 7th Avenue South, run it east along 7th Avenue to Oakwood Drive, cross private property via easement, bore under Highway 212, and then drain into the McLaughlin Ponds, which would then exit or outlet into the Big Sioux River. Using this alternative allows pipe to be buried deeper. It allows for bigger pipe to be placed into the ground and therefore allows more capacity to be provided. Also, because the location, 7th Avenue, basically falls in the center of the drainage basins that are affected, it allows for shorter lengths of pipe to hook into the main line for the participating regional detention facilities. Hope everybody understand where I'm at right now. We consider this the preferred alternative, as I stated. The city proposes to borrow up to $1.3 million of Clean Water State Revolving Funds at 3.25% interest for 20 years. The proposed financing will have no effects on user rates as the city does not levy a stormwater user fee. The city will pay back the loan out of general funds with sales tax revenues. The city does expect to recoup some of its incurred costs as future development occurs and goes on to this system. It's expected that costs will be recouped based on percentage of runoff from a particular site in relation to the entire drainage basin amount in a fully developed condition. This covers the items that I needed to address for the public hearing. Ardell and I will be happy to address any questions you might have. And then if there's none after closing the public hearing, we'd ask you to adopt the facilities plan with any recommended changes that are proposed.
Thank you, Herb. Is there anyone else to speak to this issue? If not, then we'll close the public hearing and request council action then on the loan facilities plan. May I have a motion, please? Motion by Mr. Giselbeck. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. York. Is there any further discussion?
I'll defer to Ardell. I think we were talking 54-inch at the start.
Herb, I did have one question. Go back to the part again where you said we'd recoup some of the costs from the developers, and that would be, what kind of formula are you going to use to decide who pays what?
It would be based on new development.
Based on new development,
Yeah,
yes.
we wouldn't see that we could go back and ask somebody that is already there to have to participate in costs, but it would be based on, as we see it today, the percent of runoff from that existing site in relation to the what the entire system would require. And that's similar to the process that we used out by Walmart.
Maybe I should ask what the definition of new development is.
If somebody comes in tomorrow with a master plan for an area that doesn't have anything sitting on it today, or took a building off and put a new one on, that would be, in my mind, considered new development.
And what about the businesses that are already there? Are they going to profit in any way by this new system, or will things go on just like they have been for them? I know they've developed their own system.
If a current business that exists already has an on-site detention facility, we're not going to ask them to remove it. If they so desire to remove it and hook into our system, then there would be a participation fee.
But they won't be required to. Okay.
As long as they have on-site detention. Or the original pond constructed behind the event center was constructed for those sites in an undeveloped condition, with the exception of the Ramcota and the state building. The rest of them, if they developed, then they would be required to participate to the difference between the undeveloped versus the fully developed condition.
How will that be zoned back there? What kind of businesses is that going to appeal to?
Not sure I can answer that tonight, Nancy, based
Okay.
on along the highway it's C3. In the back, I believe some of it is still zoned light industrial.
Well, I'm confused because I'm trying to visualize in my head how much undeveloped land there is back there, and it seems to me that it's pretty minimal.
Well, you have a fair amount of land.
There's a fair amount along 212,
Yeah,
and
on
part of
like-
which the city
A lot
owns.
along 212, along 4th Avenue. You know, there's a fair amount out there.
Some of the undeveloped areas are this corner here on Quaddy Drive, the additional property that the city owns, some area north of the pond area. There's some area over in this area that's undeveloped. Quaddy has some property back here that is undeveloped. I don't know if they will ever develop it, but there'll be some opportunities there. That's I believe most of it that exists right in that area. As you go east farther, there's some of the sale barn property. If that ever develops to anything other than the sale barn, there's potential for recouping some costs in those areas.
Is this project, looking at the direction it's supposed to flow, the easterly side of it looks like it's higher? Is there a lift station or something like that in there? Or?
No, this will all, there's adequate slope to have gravity all the way over to this pond. And then there is just a control pipe here which will limit how full that pond will get before it goes into the river.
That's the Sioux River on the right there.
The Sioux River is right here.
Well, Brad mentioned undeveloped property on 212. I don't know where that is, but and looking at the map, I don't see a lot of undeveloped property on 212.
Actually, there's some here on the south side here too that I had overlooked that has the potential.
On the south side of the highway is going to be taken in by this
It
drainage
drains
thing?
under the highway. So this area right in here, I guess I had overlooked that one when I was pointing this out.
Plus right across the road, just to the west of, or east of the event center.
Yeah.
There's a big track right in there, plus
Yeah,
right
the
across.
city property and
right in
and
there.
this area right here are pretty good sized areas.
Dave, on the flooding issue, you talk about a 5-year frequency and then capable of handling a 100-year event. Can you explain that a little further?
Well, the sewer will be designed to handle a 5-year event, but there will be adequate detention, built into the system to handle the 100-year. Water will build up in certain areas, one of them being this pond. There'll be a couple detention ponds that'll be required over here, one in this area and one down in this area, small detention ponds to handle those 100-year flows.
Another one by the sale barn, Dave?
Yeah, and there's also going to be some detention back in this area to handle.
How's this whole project going to affect the clean water deal that the sale barn is involved in now?
What we've seen as far as a preliminary plan is that they're going to have a pond back in this area to collect the runoff from their site, and that won't discharge into the storm sewer system.
To answer your question, Mr. Heller, we coordinated with both Helms Engineering and the sale barn to make sure we didn't have a conflict there.
Dave, on these detention ponds, are any of these slow release detention ponds, or Or are they just strictly detention ponds?
Not sure exactly what you're saying by low release, but all, I mean, any detention pond, you know, will, I mean, all of these detention ponds will drain out. They're not meant to permanently hold water. They're just meant to hold water on a temporary basis.
Are there any other questions?
I don't have a question, but there is one factor I should point out to you, that this project is in the city's long-term capital improvement plan that was approved by the council last summer. In that plan, the proposed financing source was to pay for this project entirely from capital improvement funds. And part of the motivation to, really the sole motivation to pursue state revolving fund loan financing for this project is to free up those dollars that would otherwise be used for this project to pursue the First Avenue extension, and that's this loan will accomplish that. It certainly won't be enough to do the entire First Avenue extension, but it will free up dollars that had not been allocated for that particular project. So I think it's important for the council to know that the financing for this project deviates a little bit from what the original plan was, but that is the justification for it.
And I think also we want to encourage development out by our event center to create more activity on that area. And by doing what we're doing, I think we are really laying the good groundwork to have that happen. So, any other questions for Dave? If not, then all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Dave.
Mayor, we need to also get the council's approval on the resolution that you have on your desktop, if we could.
Okay.
That's resolution 0603 to sign the SRF loan application. Basically, the resolution states the city's applying to the South Dakota Environment and Natural Resources for up to $1.3 million at 3.25% for 20 years, that the city is required to designate a certifying officer and that the mayor is designated as the certifying officer for the purpose of signing the loan application and other documents pertinent to the loan.
Thank you, Herb. May I have a motion then for the approval of Resolution 6-03?
I'd so move.
So moved by Mr. Heller. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Garnos. Is there any further discussion? If not, then all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Herb. Item number 10 is the motion to approve the resolution number 6-01, setting the 2006 salaries for elected, appointed, and exempt employees. Tracy.
I can address this resolution and the next. These are resolutions that we adopt each year, typically at our first meeting in January. 0601, as the title indicates, establishes the salary for the calendar year 2006, or salaries for those employees that are either elected, appointed officials, or other employee positions that are exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act and not part of a collective bargaining agreement. The next resolution that we'll address will be 0602. That resolution establishes the salary and the pay rates for all of the employees whose positions are covered by one of our 3 collective bargaining agreements. Both resolutions reflect a 3% cost of living increase for full-time employees. And really, this year, this 2006 year, represents the 5th year in the 5-year rollout of our compensation plan that was adopted by the council in 2001. And so this is kind of the final leg of that, although as we bring on new employees, they are starting out and they will roll out through that same time frame, depending somewhat on how contracts are negotiated in the years to come. But if there are any questions, I'd certainly try to answer them. Otherwise, I would ask for your approval of both resolutions 0601 and 0602.
Tracy, there would be no pay increase for the mayor or the city council. Is that correct? So we get that on.
There are no.
There are no pay increases for the mayor or for the city council. So, well,
Speak for yourself, John.
Okay. Yeah, rats. So, okay, just kidding, outside.
Just pay you what you worth.
Watch out, George.
So with that being said, may we have a motion then for approval of 0601 and 0602?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Garnos. Is there seconded by Mr. Gizelbeck? Is there any further discussion? If not, then all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 13 is the open, and we have one of our senators and some of our other representatives, Mr. Fain here.
Got number 12.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Sorry, Tracy. Let's move on to approving the bills.
Actually, before we do that, we should also approve that second resolution, 0602 as well, so the,
Okay, number 11, for a motion for 0602.
So move.
So moved by Mrs. Walder. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Johnson. Is there any further discussion on that issue? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 12 is a motion to approve the bills and payroll as presented and authorize payment. May I have a motion for that, please? So moved by Mr. Solberg. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mrs. Arbogast. Is there any discussion? If not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next is number 13, which is the open. And Senator Schoenbeck, I guess you were going to speak to us tonight?
I guess so. Well, hello. Thanks for inviting me. I've only been here once before when my father-in-law, Don Fox, was the president of the city council, so it's a different group. I talked with Councilman Garnos, Alderman Garnos, at the Government Affairs Committee meeting for the chamber about an issue that has been brewing legislatively, and it greatly affects the city. And Dean Gackstetter is here on behalf of the Military Affairs Committee. General Edwards left to go south for the winter here just a few days ago, otherwise he'd be here. And that the reason for talking with you now for a little bit about it is to see if the city wants us to push this legislatively, because I think it's going to, if we're going to, it's going to take a commitment from the city to do it. And that has to do with the National Guard Army project. And I'll give you the real short version from a legislative perspective. For the last little over a year or so, maybe almost two now, in talking with people from the city about this, I've suggested that we should legislatively address one of the problems that we have here, which is, and I'm not the expert to talk about all of this, there are others that have been involved for a decade in it, but my understanding is the process within the Department of Defense for covering the local match has changed, and you can't make in lieu contributions, and so now it's got to be cash on the barrelhead. And what's happened is there's now a split between the city and the state about who should pay that 25% local match. And different states do it different ways. And for the last over a year, the people like General Edwards and others have been working with the National Guard, who are highly supportive of seeing a new facility put here in Watertown. And working with the governor to try and get the governor to agree to something other than the locals paying 100%, and they have been unsuccessful. And so that's brought to the forefront whether we should address it legislatively. When you deal with it legislatively, there are two steps. One is, or can be two steps, and that's what my suggestion has been led to this me being here now. One is legislation that addresses the policy, which is the statute that would say on the local match it's 50% local, 50% state. The second one is an appropriations bill, which is a different issue. It takes 2/3 votes, too, by the way, compared to a majority to set the policy statute. And so I've been advocating for some time now that what we ought to be doing is not just dealing with our project, but dealing with all the armories in South Dakota that may be approved through the Department of Defense Guard add-on process with the feds, and that is to adopt that statute to make it 50-50. I would have liked to have seen this been done 1 or 2 years ago before ours was right in the crosshairs of being the next one, because of course it looks a shade self-serving now. But thanks to the PO, it's no secret this is my last chance to help you with this if you want me to. And so I've said that I would, if the city was interested in doing this. It's good for the Guard, it's good for the community, but the reason somebody's going to have to take some commitment to get behind it if you're going to do it. And I'm going to tell you that I don't have the time to, I mean, I got a list of things this long, and this is a big project that just popped up this week, okay? It's not going to pass. I can introduce it. I'm already having it drafted so that it'll be ready if you want to go. But I'm going to need some help if we're going to get it through. And my suggestion to Alderman Garnos was that, I mean, you got somebody from Watertown who's a part-time lobbyist in Pierre right now, and that's Barry Wilford, who's worked with this issue for over a decade. And that the city ought to, if you want us to do it, you ought to let us know, because it still is going to be a 50% of the local match that would be on your shoulders if we were successful in getting this passed. And secondly, I think you need to get somebody to be a lobbyist for the city on this project, and because it means a lot financially to you. I think it means a lot to the Guard locally, and it's not going to happen otherwise. And if you don't do it, you're going to be sitting here next year and the year after and for the next 10 years, or maybe not 10 years, but for a long time, talking about how come we don't get this done, and it's not going to get done. And with all due respect for what's going on in the last almost 2 years is, within the military culture, there's a respect for command, and they're highly deferential. So I think they thought I was nuts 2 years ago, and I said, why don't I just put it in the legislation? We'll just charge in there and fix this, because they all wanted to work together, and they have tried hard to work this out in the chain of command, and it's not happening. And so if we don't do it legislatively, you either have to abandon the project or make a decision to spend a lot more money than I think is currently planned. And that's, I don't know if Bob or Al have something to add, or Dean. I'd try and answer any questions for you.
Well, I think it's a good idea that we pursue it. I think we're in a position right now where the last I heard on this deal was about $16-17 million, and the city's share anywhere from $4 to $5 million. Something to that magnitude most likely would require a bond, and we'd take it to a vote, and there'd be no guarantee that voters of this community would support a $4 to $5 million project. So from my perspective, a 50-50 deal benefits the state, the federal government, and us as well, because if it's just up to us to put a new armory in and spend $5 million, then we might not get a new armory. And I think if the state of South Dakota wants a new armory and the federal government wants it, they've got to handle a bigger share of it. It's unfortunate that we have to spend the money to lobby to secure a federal and a state project that has lesser degree benefit to us, but I would like you guys, from my perspective, to push it. I know some other communities have tried to push this concept in the past without great success, but with trust in your capabilities.
Well, let me tell you that Mobridge, I think, Dean maybe would know this, but I recollect back that one of the last ones built was DeSmit, and that's probably been over a decade ago. They don't build armories very often, but Mobridge is doing one, and Mobridge came to the legislature last year, but they wanted the state to pay 100%. And I had a discussion with the chief of staff then, and I would have another one with him next week if we're going to push forward with this. That the Guard's good for us locally. I mean, I think the community supports the Guard, but it's a state federal mission, so there are two other partners in this deal, and a 50-50 sharing of those non-federal expenditures makes everybody have a little knife in the fight, and it's important to everybody. But if the state has to do 100%, that's just bad policy, because then everybody's going to want to have one. So
Lee, it's been such a moving target for the last decade. It started out many years ago as Watertown would pretty much just be furnishing a place for the armory to sit. And that seemed really good, and it seemed like we were moving forward with that plan. Then everything was completely changed again. It's been everywhere from there up to us furnishing about $10 million, and I don't even know what the chances would be in the times that we're in right now of the government even looking at building an armory in Watertown, South Dakota, without us putting up the lion's share of the money. And I just don't know that we're prepared to do that. I haven't heard that kind of support from the community. Maybe the community's just gotten tired of hearing about it completely because they don't think it's ever going to happen. I'm not sure, but I don't know how much money we want to put into it when it looks like it could be a dead-end road.
And Nancy, that's a decision, or Alderman York, that's a decision that you have to make. I'm just telling you, if you want to, then you should just decide to quit talking about it. Is probably but but rather than sitting around talking about it at government affairs committee meetings and military affairs committee meetings, you either ought to do something, you got to do something or quit talking about it. And if you want to do something, this is at least my suggestion about one way to do something besides visiting.
I would rely on the memories of some of the other council people that were here a year or so ago. What was our last commitment that we decided? What was it? That's what I was thinking, but I wasn't sure if that was correct. And as far as I know, that was still what's on the table, correct?
But that was never, I mean, that was an unofficial recommendation. I mean, we never brought that $2 million to the full council that this was all we were going to do. I think that went to one committee, and and it was withdrawn at that point because of one of the many disasters that hit right at that point, and we thought it was unreasonable to throw that on the table. But 2 million was there. But you know, reality is that under the present system, it's 4 or 5 million, or it's not going to happen. And this community would have a much better chance of supporting it at 2 million or 2.5 million than it would at 5. So.
Representative Koisman wanted me to mention to you also that you know, the Guard's in the process of looking through a reorganization and developing a new plan, and it would seem that well, I think that they're going to focus on population centers irregardless. It certainly would seem that we'd be better situated as they're allocating their missions, the better facility that we have. And while I don't think local economic impact is a deciding factor, or should be, and when you talk about military preparedness, it certainly is one you can't ignore, and the Guard is a substantial local economic impact. About 6 million, they said.
I have a kind of a different kind of a question, Senator. It seems to me that, and I may be completely wrong, but it seems to me that there was a mention at one time of a huge development cost that was in addition to the main part of the thing. You know, the 2.5 million split or the 5 million or whatever it is. There was another, maybe even $250,000 that the city was going to have to come up with as far as development costs. Do you know anything about that? Does anybody remember that?
I'd be the wrong one.
What?
But Dean
Gackstetter would probably be best to answer that, too.
Dean Gackstetter, Military Affairs Committee. The city has to furnish the land, which would be approximately $300,000. And the city also would have to pay 25% of the design of the building, which I think is about 200,000. So about 500 is correct. Right. And then they will, then we join the 25% of the total cost of the 16.8 million of the building proper.
Okay, and doing the math in your head quickly, what comes out to what for the city share using those figures?
Yeah, about 5 million.
I think the other unknown question was not knowing exactly where this is going to be located, and potentially maybe along the new Highway 20 bypass. We don't necessarily have sewer and water lines run out into that area, and if it was going to be in that vicinity, there would be some costs associated with running those types of lines. So there's, you know, that's the ballpark figure. We don't have a total handle on what the whole picture is, because we don't know where they're going to go with it.
No,
for
the
sure.
proposed part is by the new bypass.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we had couple of potential locations out there. One south of Highway 20, and then the other one now maybe north on all the land that the state bought.
See, when we started this, the total project was about 4 million. Then we would pay $1 million of that. It is because of 9/11, with all the new security problems, it has jumped up to, the last figure was about 16.8 million.
Well, I think the other part of the picture, and we don't, Gordy saw a proposal. I got a copy of the proposal from Mr. Wilford in regarding consulting or lobbying services, and I think we're talking about, you know, $500 to $5,500 if we were going to pursue that. You know, and we wouldn't be able to act on that tonight, but you know, I guess to move things along, I would make a motion that we ask our legislators to pursue legislation that would provide for a 50-50 split, the local and state, to get that introduced, and that the city would do everything it could to provide support to get that passed.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mrs. York. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor, excuse me.
I would just like to say, being part of both military affairs and government affairs, we as chamber people are constantly talking about industrial development, and in the last couple of years we've gone into doing what we can for retail development. If for no other reason this project goes through, is for both industrial development and retail development, because the amount of money that the Guard spends in Watertown, both from salaries, equipment, supplies, etc., this would be an overwhelming successful development project. The commitment from Watertown is desperately needed at this time, and I would like to say that towns like Mitchell and Huron and Yankton and some of those larger cities will be very supportive as well, because the time will come when they too will need a new armory, and this law then will be in effect. We want to remember, this is not an appropriation bill, but this is a bill to pass into law, breaking ground to help us with an appropriation later on.
Well, I agree with Councilman Garnis. I think we should move ahead with this, but at least for the present, the only commitment that we're making is that we're moving ahead with this and asking our legislative people to help us with this. We're not making any other sound or unsound financial commitments at this time.
No, as I said, this is not an appropriation action. It's a law, action for law.
I'm not talking about state or any other commitment except ours.
Thank you for that clarification, Alderman Heller.
Mayor Fox, may
Yes.
I ask Senator Schoenbeck a question?
Yes.
Dean just pointed out a minute ago that the city would be responsible to provide 100% of the land, and in addition to pay for the local share of the architectural fees. And I'm just wondering if the legislation that you're having drafted would have the state participate equally in those costs as well in a 50-50 way, to make it truly a 50-50 split, or if you had even considered that.
You get somebody good helping me, and we'll make sure that the draft looks that way.
Yeah, because in this case, you know, if they put it on the north side of Highway 20, the state owns all of that land already. You know,
The point we need to recognize here is that land out there purchased by the state for the bypass was purchased through gas tax dollars, which precludes us working out any financial arrangements with the state on the purchase of the land, as my understanding.
State constitution says that all gas tax dollars have to be used for transportation. The new campus that you haven't read about but will shortly down in Sioux Falls is going to be on land that DOT owns, that the regions have to buy at market value for a campus, just like this would have to be bought at market value, because you can't divert funds away from the gas tax fund, according to our constitution.
Is there any other questions for Senator Schoenbeck?
Have we given you what you need to do your work?
Well, that'd be a first step.
Okay, okay.
Hopefully, like in the real near future, say within a week or so, you'll have somebody ready to spearhead an attack.
Yeah. Okay, then. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Senator Schoenbeck. Thank you, other representatives, for coming too. Thank you, Dean. Item number 14 is old business. Is there any old business to come before the council? Item number 15, is there any new business? Item number 16, are there any liaison member reports? We will need to go into executive session to discuss some contract negotiations. So if I could have a motion then, please, to go in executive session. So moved by Mrs. Arbogast. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. Walder. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried.